Way out in the remote landscapes of Patagonia, there's this incredible message written on stone. So today, we're going to try and decode the story of the Cueva de las Manos, that's the Cave of the Hands, and really understand what these ancient people were trying to tell us.
Just look at this. You've got these stencils in incredible reds, blacks, and whites, hundreds of human hands literally reaching out to us across thousands of years. I mean, this is so much more than just art, right? It's a direct connection to people who lived and breathed so long ago.
And that's really the big question, isn't it? That's what we're going to dig into. Who were these artists? And what was it that made them press their hands against this rock to preserve their own presence for what feels like eternity?
Okay, so before we can even get to the art, you really have to understand the place itself. And our story starts somewhere seriously remote and seriously dramatic.
So the cave is tucked away in the cliffs of the Pinturas River Canyon. And you have to remember, for the people back then, this wasn't just some pretty view. It was a place that was strategically vital. It was basically a natural fortress, carved right out of the rock by the river.
And believe me, they chose this spot for some very good reasons. For starters, those canyon walls, they offered perfect protection from those brutal Patagonian winds. That created this sort of unique little microclimate, a pocket where plants could grow and animals would gather. Plus, the river not only carved out the shelter, but also provided a vital water source that drew in the herds they hunted. I mean, it was the perfect setup.
All right, so who were these people who found this perfect spot? Let's talk about the artists themselves.
So, the first thing to know is that these folks didn't live here year-round. The people who made this art were nomadic hunter-gatherers. They were constantly on the move, following the seasons and the animal migrations. Yeah, this cave was more like a crucial stop, a landmark on their seasonal route.
I mean, their entire way of life, everything, was built around being on the move. They weren't farmers, they didn't raise animals. Their whole survival game was about having an intimate knowledge of the land, knowing where to find food, and being skilled hunters.
And right here, you can see that link between their art and their survival, plain as day. On the left, you've got this awesome, energetic painting of a hunt. And on the right, that's the guanaco. Think of it like a wild cousin of the llama. And this animal was their entire world. Food, fur for clothing, bones for tools, you name it. So of course it shows up in their art. It shows you exactly what was on their minds.
Okay, so let's dive into the masterpiece itself. How can we read these walls? What is this 9,000-year-old message actually trying to tell us?
Okay, the way they made this stuff is just brilliant. So simple, but so effective. First, they had to source their pigments right from the landscape. Iron oxides for the reds, kaolin for white, manganese for black. They grind them into a powder. And here's a cool little mystery. They mixed that powder with some kind of binder to make the paint, but to this day, we still have no idea what it was. Then, get this, they'd put their hand on the rock and use a hollowed-out bone like an ancient spray paint can, blowing the paint right over their hand to create that amazing outline.
All right, now I'm going to throw a number at you. 829. Just let that sink in for a second. What on earth could that mean?
Well, here's what it means. Out of all the handprints they can clearly identify, a massive 829 of them are left hands, and only 31 are right hands. So think about it. What does that tell us? It suggests that most of the artists were right-handed. They were holding the bone pite, their little spray can, in their dominant right hand and stenciling their left. It's such a tiny detail, but wow, it just makes them feel so human, so relatable.
And they didn't just do this once and leave. This place was an active art gallery for thousands of years. Archaeologists have figured out there are basically 3 different artistic periods. The earliest stuff, way back around 7300 BC, is all about those action-packed hunting scenes. Then, a couple thousand years later, the style totally changes. It gets more static, and that's when you see those huge, dense walls of handprints. And then the final layer of art, all the way up to around 700 AD, is almost completely abstract, all geometric shapes and zigzags. It's like watching art history evolve on one single rock wall.
Which, of course, brings us back to the million-dollar question. Why? Why did they do all this? What was the point?
And the honest answer is, we don't really know for sure, but wow, there are some really compelling theories. Was it that simple human need to just say, I was here, I existed? Maybe. Could it have been part of some sacred ceremony or a shaman trying to connect with the spirit world? For sure. Some people think they might have been territory markers, or maybe it was like a history book, a way to pass down stories and build a collective memory for the group. The real answer is probably a mix of all of these, and that enduring mystery, well, that's a huge part of what makes this place so powerful.
Okay, so let's fast forward to today. What does this place mean to us now? And how do we make sure this ancient echo doesn't just fade away?
Well, there's a good reason this site gets so much attention. It's widely considered to be the absolute best physical proof we have of how those early hunter-gatherer societies lived in South America. It's literally an irreplaceable window into a world that's long gone.
Because it's so incredibly important, it was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site back in 1999. That means it's now protected, with boardwalks and guided tours to help manage the roughly 8,000 people who make the pilgrimage here every year.
But that recognition, it brings its own dangers. The biggest threats now are, honestly, us, people. You've got vandalism, and even something as simple as people touching the paintings can cause permanent damage. Just the sheer number of visitors adds new risks. And all of that is on top of the slow, steady process of natural erosion from the elements. Protecting this site is a constant battle.
And that really leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. I mean, think about it. This message in stone has survived for 90 centuries through wind, ice, and sun. It's an amazing testament to human creativity and that deep, deep need to leave a mark. So the real question for our generation is, what will we do to make sure this message continues to endure?